Dawn breaks slowly, as if reluctantly, over an African river. Fog still lingers, but from the depths, a hippopotamus rises to the surface, snorting loudly. Its body resembles a grey boulder, barely alive. And on this boulder, amidst the calm ripples, stands a bird, a white heron. It doesn't move, as if unaware that it's standing on the back of one of Africa's most dangerous animals. Did you know that hippos kill more people in Africa than lions, leopards, and crocodiles combined? And a small bird perches right on its head and remains alive, unharmed, and even seems completely safe. In this episode, you'll learn why the heron chooses the hippopotamus, what it gains from such a risky companion, and why the hippopotamus itself, instead of shaking the bird off with a flick of its neck, calmly tolerates it. We'll figure out who's getting the most out of this, and whether it really can be called a deal. Like and subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Let's start with what a hippopotamus really is. It's not the slow, sluggish creature you see in cartoons. It's an animal weighing up to 1.5, sometimes almost 2 tons, capable of reaching speeds on land that few humans could outrun. Hippos have some of the most powerful jaws of any land mammal, and scientists and locals unanimously describe their unpredictable nature. Hippos defend their water territory fiercely and without warning. That's why, when it comes to the most dangerous animals on the African continent to humans, the hippopotamus almost always ranks first among the large animals. And there, perched on the back of this giant, amidst folds of thick grey skin, stands a bird slightly larger than a crow. It seems like some kind of freak of nature, but the more you observe such scenes on the rivers and lakes of eastern and southern Africa, the clearer it becomes. This is no accident. This is a recurring, consistent behavior that scientists have been documenting for years. So who is this brave neighbor? Most often, it's a great egret, Ardea alba, or its smaller relative, the egret. Sometimes African rails or even oxpeckers are spotted near hippos, but it's the egrets and egrets that are the most frequent and most visible passengers on the backs of these giants. The first question arises: why does the hippopotamus allow the bird to get so close? After all, one sudden head movement and the heron could be seriously injured. One false dive and the bird could drown or be crushed. But this doesn't happen. Time after time, day after day, the herons climb onto the hippos' backs, and the hippos seem to ignore them. Scientists studying the behavior of large African mammals note an interesting detail. Hippos, contrary to the image created by their aggressiveness toward humans and other hippos, are quite tolerant of small animals that pose no threat and do not attempt to attack. A bird sitting quietly on a hippopotamus's back poses no danger to it. It does not hinder its movement, does not attempt to bite, and does not claim its territory in the same way that other hippos do. Therefore, a hippopotamus's reaction to a heron is fundamentally different from its reaction to a relative or a predator. But it's one thing to endure. Reading the signals emitted by a 2-ton animal with an unpredictable nature is quite another. And here's where things get interesting. Bird observers note that herons feeding or resting near large herbivores react to the slightest changes in the animal's posture, a barely noticeable muscle tension before the hippo begins to dive. A slight turn of the head, a change in breathing rhythm. All of these serve as signals to the bird. It either flies to a new location on the animal's body or takes off entirely if it senses the hippo preparing for a sudden move. This isn't some mystical connection between species. It's the result of constant, daily practice. Birds that feed near large savanna mammals, be they buffalo, zebras, giraffes, or hippos, develop a kind of behavioral sensitivity. They literally live to the rhythm of their enormous neighbor, adapting to its every movement. A mistake can cost lives, so natural selection mercilessly weeds out those who haven't learned to read these signals in time. Now, let's imagine the scene in a little more detail. It's early morning, the water still chilly from the night before. A herd of hippos lies in the shallows, half submerged, only their ears, eyes and nostrils protruding above the surface. One heron perches on the back of a large female. Another chooses a young male at the edge of the group. A third prefers to stay close, in the shallows, not risking mounting the animal itself, but following its every movement through the water. Why such a difference in behavior? There's logic here too. More experienced, older birds are more likely to make direct contact with the hippopotamus's body. They've already accumulated enough observations to trust their ability to react in time. Younger birds often keep their distance, preferring safety to risk, although they lose some of the potential benefit of such proximity. What exactly is this benefit? That's the subject of the next chapter. But before we move on, it's worth highlighting another important fact. Such associations between herons and large herbivores are far from exceptional in the wild. They're a common phenomenon, recorded in many regions of Africa where large ungulates and aquatic mammals live. Scientists call these feeding associations, and the hippopotamus and heron are just one, albeit one of the most spectacular, examples of this behavior. So who do we have before us? A brave bird risking its life for profit, or a calculating partner who knows exactly what he's doing? The answer turns out to be much more interesting than it seems at first glance. To understand why a heron risks landing on a hippopotamus's back, you need to look at the river not through the eyes of a human, but through the eyes of a bird that hunts for survival every day. For the heron, the question isn't whether it's scary. The question is how much food it can get in the time it has before sunset. When a hippopotamus emerges from the water to graze or simply move through the shallows, it acts as a veritable engine for the entire surrounding ecosystem near the shore. Its massive legs stir up silt, disturbed fish, frogs, and aquatic invertebrates from the bottom. On land, wading through the grass in search of grazing food, it flushes out grasshoppers, crickets, and other insects hiding in the undergrowth. All of this suddenly becomes visible, and a heron, perched either directly on the hippopotamus's back or nearby, receives a nearly ready-made meal that would take much longer and with much greater effort to gather on its own. Scientists studying this behavior in large savanna mammals call it foraging association. It's a well-established term in biology, referring to a situation where one animal takes advantage of the movement of another, larger animal, which disturbs its prey. A similar mechanism operates in other species. Oxpeckers feed on insects picked up by grazing buffalo and zebras, and some heron species similarly follow elephants and giraffes. But the hippopotamus is a bit different, as much of its activity occurs in water rather than on land, meaning the prey it picks up is often aquatic: small fish, frogs, and aquatic insects. Studies show that birds feeding near large herbivores expend significantly less energy searching for food and are more efficient at capturing it than birds hunting alone in the open. This doesn't mean the heron has completely forgotten how to hunt independently. It's perfectly capable of standing motionless by the water for hours, waiting for the right moment to pounce. But being near a hippopotamus allows it to conserve energy and time. And in the wild, conserving energy is almost always a matter of survival, especially during the dry season, when food becomes scarce and competition for it is fiercer. There's a second, less obvious role that the heron plays alongside the hippopotamus, that of a kind of cleaner. Despite its aquatic lifestyle, the hippopotamus's skin often becomes home to small parasites and insects. Ticks, fly larvae, and other small creatures that find the animal's thick hide a convenient hiding place. Heron observers have repeatedly recorded how the bird, while standing on the hippopotamus's back, occasionally bends down and pecks at something from its skin. This isn't the heron's primary source of nutrition, Insects and small creatures picked up from the bottom or grass are far more important. But this skin cleaning clearly provides the bird with an additional, albeit small, benefit. It's worth mentioning right away the extent to which herons systematically and purposefully groom hippopotamuses hasn't been fully studied. Scientists can't yet say with certainty whether this is a distinct, specifically developed feeding strategy, or simply a side effect of the bird generally pecking at anything edible within reach while perched on a comfortable perch. This is a case where it's more honest to say there's insufficient data to draw a definitive conclusion than to present a hypothesis as proven fact. However, another aspect of this proximity is far better documented: the hippopotamus's use as a kind of observation tower. The back of an adult hippopotamus rises high enough above the water to allow the heron to see much further and better than standing knee-deep in shallow water. This gives the bird an advantage. It can spot schools of small fish, movement in the water, and potential prey at a greater distance than would be possible from ground level. Essentially, the hippopotamus becomes a living observation post, a floating tower from which to easily spot the best hunting spots. Interestingly, observers have observed similar behavior by herons near hippos not only on large rivers like the Zambezi or the Okavango Delta, but also in small, seasonal pools where entire groups of hippos congregate during dry periods. In such conditions, when water becomes scarce and the number of animals per unit area increases sharply, competition for prey among the birds themselves also intensifies. And here, those herons that have mastered the tactic of feeding near large mammals gain an advantage. They are simply more effective than those who rely solely on their own strength. There's another detail that makes the picture more interesting. Herons don't simply perch on the first hippopotamus they come across. Observations show that the birds often select specific individuals, those that are more active, change feeding sites more frequently, or graze on land rather than lying motionless in the water for hours. The logic is simple. A motionless hippopotamus doesn't pick up prey from the bottom or disturb insects in the grass, meaning there's nothing to eat nearby. An active hippopotamus, on the other hand, is a constant source of disturbed food. It appears that the heron, in a sense, evaluates the hippopotamus's behavior and chooses the most advantageous feeding partner at the moment. Although, of course, this isn't a conscious calculation in the human sense of the word. Rather, it's an evolutionarily ingrained behavioral strategy, honed by countless generations of birds. What happens when a hippopotamus finally begins to submerge itself completely, escaping the midday heat? The heron, perched on its back, doesn't panic. It either flies to the nearest hippopotamus in the same group, or takes off and lands on the nearby shallows, continuing to observe the group, waiting for the next opportune moment. This confirms, once again, that the bird's behavior is far from random. It's a calculated, flexible strategy in which the heron constantly assesses the situation and adapts to it. By midday, when the sun rises high and the heat becomes sweltering, most hippos actually submerge almost entirely, leaving only their eyes and nostrils above the surface. At this time, the activity of nearby herons decreases. Less animal movement means fewer prey to disturb. During these hours, the birds often either rest in the shade of riverside trees or move to other food sources. By evening, when the hippos begin to emerge onto land for nighttime grazing, the feeding association between the species resumes with renewed vigor, this time on dry land, among the tall savanna grass. So, for the heron, the benefit is obvious and confirmed by years of observation. More efficient hunting thanks to flushed prey, a better vantage point, energy savings, and possibly an additional food source in the form of parasites on the animal's skin. But the question that begs to be asked is, what does the hippopotamus gain from this? Does the 2-ton giant simply tolerate the bird on its back, receiving absolutely nothing in return? Or is there another side to this deal that deserves a separate discussion? While the heron derives obvious and well-documented benefits from its proximity to the hippopotamus, the situation with the hippopotamus itself is far more complex. Scientists are still debating the symmetry of this relationship. The honest answer is this: some of the hippopotamus's benefits are confirmed by observations, while others remain mere speculation that remains to be proven. Let's start with the best documented aspect: skin cleaning. The hippopotamus's thick hide, despite its durability, is quite vulnerable to small parasites, ticks, insect larvae, as well as wounds and lesions that can become infected in the humid river environment. When the heron pecks parasites or larvae from the skin's surface, it is essentially performing the work of a cleaner. This phenomenon in biology is called obligate or facultative mutualism, depending on how dependent the species are on each other. And in the case of the hippopotamus and heron, it's more of a non-obligatory, flexible partnership than a strict mutual dependence. The hippopotamus can live perfectly well without the heron on its back, but slightly fewer parasites on its skin is still a small benefit to its comfort and health. The second hypothesis advanced by researchers of large African mammal behavior concerns the bird's role as a kind of danger signal. The logic here is as follows. The heron has keen vision and a quick reaction to any movement nearby. If something alarming approaches a group of hippos, be it a crocodile, a predator on the shore, or simply a sudden change in the environment, the heron can react before the hippopotamus itself, taking flight or changing its behavior. And such a sudden movement by the heron could theoretically serve as an additional signal to the hippopotamus, even though its own vision and hearing are quite well developed without outside assistance. It's important to make a disclaimer here, as scientific integrity demands. Direct, rigorously verified studies proving that hippos actually use heron behavior as an alarm signal are extremely rare. This is more of a logical assumption suggested by the overall behavioral pattern than a hard and fast fact. Scientists studying such interspecies interactions in the wild note that proving intentional reading by one species of another is extremely difficult. It's difficult to distinguish coincidence from genuine behavior, especially when dealing with such a cautious animal as the hippopotamus, which spends most of its time submerged. Therefore, to be perfectly honest, the main benefits in this relationship are distributed unevenly. The heron gets a lot: food, a vantage point, partial parasite control, and energy savings. The hippopotamus, however, apparently either gains next to nothing directly or receives benefits so insignificant that they are difficult to measure and confirm in the field. This type of relationship in biology is often called commensalism, a form of coexistence in which one species clearly benefits while the other experiences a virtually neutral outcome, bringing neither tangible benefit nor tangible harm. And that's precisely why calling this relationship a transaction in the literal equal sense wouldn't be entirely accurate. Rather, it's a one-sided exploitation of an opportunity, which the hippopotamus simply tolerates because the cost of such patience is negligible. The bird doesn't interfere with its feeding, poses no threat, and doesn't take up resources. And since there are no costs, evolution has no reason to develop the hippopotamus's behavior aimed at driving off the heron. But even such a seemingly harmless proximity remains fragile. A single sudden movement, for example when a hippopotamus suddenly turns, defending its territory from another male, or swiftly dives into the water upon sensing danger, and the heron risks being unprepared to react in time. This is why birds feeding near hippos never completely let their guard down. They constantly, every second, read the body language of their giant neighbor, the position of their ears, the tension of their neck, the slightest changes in breathing. This entire bond is based not on trust in the human sense, but on the bird's long-standing, generation-honed ability to recognize impending danger and simply take flight at the right moment. It's worth remembering that scenes like these, a heron on the back of a hippopotamus, are far from the only example of such relationships in African wildlife. Oxpeckers also perch on the backs of buffalo, giraffes and zebras, consuming ticks from their skin. Oxpeckers, which live on the bodies of ungulates, have developed an entire specialization specifically for grooming the fur of large mammals. But interestingly, even among these examples, the heron and hippopotamus pair stands out because it combines two elements: the terrestrial foraging behavior typical of starlings and oxpeckers, and the aquatic hunting more typical of fishing birds. It is precisely this duality that makes this partnership such an unusual example in the world of wildlife. Let's return to the image with which we opened this issue. Dawn, mist over the river, a hippopotamus rising from the water, and a heron standing imperturbably on its back. Now this image reads differently. We see not just a pretty picture from a wildlife photo bank, but the result of a complex, not fully understood, but absolutely real dynamic between two very different species. One is heavy, territorial, dangerous to anyone who dares challenge it. The other is light, cautious, seizing every opportunity its enormous neighbor offers, but never letting down its guard. Nature rarely divides its heroes into friends and foes. Far more often, it offers temporary, flexible, and advantageous arrangements, at least for one party, that can change at any moment, be interrupted, or turn out to be completely different from what they initially appeared. A heron on a hippopotamus's back is neither friendship nor pure parasitism. It's a delicate balance of opportunity and risk, where one side's gain is far more obvious than the other's, yet both parties, one way or another, continue to live side by side, just as they likely did long before the first person with binoculars or a camera spotted this scene on the banks of an African river. What do you think? Is this relationship a true partnership? Or is it more of an example of one species cleverly exploiting the other's patience? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found this strange and fragile bond between a heron and a hippopotamus interesting, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are many more amazing stories from the world of wildlife to come.